A digital detox, that it was really interesting sort of concept to me. I know you've gone through like studies of it and stuff. Like, what is it something that we should be doing, digital detoxes and trying to stay away from social media?
Yeah, so let's put a clear dividing line because it will help us think about these issues. Let's put a clear dividing line between work-related communication technologies and non-work related communication technology because I've dealt with both in different books. So we're thinking about the world of work, we're thinking about email, we're thinking about Slack. That's what I dealt with in my most recent book. That's what we were just talking about. The book I published a few years ago, however, Digital Minimalism, was working on or looking at tools in our personal life. So social media, our phones, etc., like life outside of work. In that realm, suddenly the individual response really becomes very important. So when it comes to why we're checking email so much, we have to, as a team, change our rules for how we collaborate. Otherwise, I have no recourse. I have to check it. When it comes to me looking at social media too much on my phone, unrelated to work, now the locus of control is coming back towards the individual. That's where we're going to have the biggest, shortest impact, is dramatically changing your individual relationship to your tool. This would not work in the world of email. If I dramatically changed my relationship to email, that's going to be a problem if no one else does too, because they haven't and they need me to respond or we can't get back to the client. But when it comes to me checking Twitter, I can make a change and get an immediate benefit. And I'm not enmeshed in a system of other people need me to be on Twitter. So in that book, Digital Minimalism, I argued we have to be much more intentional about our technology use. You have to know what you care about and what you want to spend time on. Then you work backwards and say, how do I want to use tech to support these things I care about? Once you know which tech you're using and why you're using it, it's much easier to put rules around it. I'm using Facebook because Facebook groups, because I belong to this group of other triathletes, and it's an important group to me. And I need to know like when the training schedule is. Oh, if that's why I'm using Facebook, now it's real easy to see, well, I don't need it on my phone and I don't need to look at the news feed. And so I'm going to put it on my computer and I'm going to put in a plugin that scrubs the news feed clean. And all I use it for is checking this group. And if all I'm doing is checking this group, I only need to do that once a week. It takes 15 minutes. Great. I get that benefit, and Facebook has no other footprint in my life. Like, so when you know why you're using a tool, like what you're trying to get out of it, you can put rules around it. And suddenly the cost benefit ratio is way, way in your advantage. And so, yeah, I talk about in that book doing this 30-day declutter. And the idea is you just take 30 days away from most of these optional tools, these personal technology tools. And during that time, you very aggressively try to answer the question of what do I actually want to spend my time doing? I mean, you actually go out there and try things, you experiment, you sign up for things, you join things, you go to things, and then you also reflect. You just think, let me try to figure out my life. Like, what do I want to do? What do I really want to spend my time doing? And then at the end of that 30 days, here's a critical part, you rebuild your digital life from scratch. All right, now that I know what I'm all about, what do I want to use to support that and what are my rules? And you come out of that experience with a completely different relationship with your tools. This is much more effective than trying to just come at it from a negative perspective and say, I use Twitter too much, I'm going to try to use Twitter less. Good luck. We know that's not going to be very successful. But if you instead have this crystal clear image of what your life wants to be, and you can feel it, like, I want my life to be like that. And you have a plan for how you use technology to make your life like that, and that plan doesn't involve Twitter. Now it's much easier to not be using Twitter, because what you're doing is not just trying to stay away from something bad. You're instead trying to pursue something very appealing. And that's a much more stronger psychological motivator.
I think the pressures of social media, like trying to, at the moment, there's a lot of like trying to share your lifestyle. If you don't share it, it didn't happen. The ego comes into it. What did you see when you did the studies? Like what were the results?
So with social media, for example, I found that, and I should qualify, the study was, I had about 1,600 people at least initiate this. Not everyone made it through, but about 1,600 people initiated going through this process. And I used the reports to help inform the book. Maybe about half the people, this is rough, about half the people came out of this exercise, rebuilt their life, rebuilt their technological life around what they cared about. About half the people had no social media in their life when they were done with this. When they looked at the things they cared about, none of them really required them to be on a social media platform. The other half of the people had some sort, at least one social media platform was reintroduced back into their life because there's a way in which it supported something they really cared about. But because they were working backwards from, this is what I want out of this tool, so they could then put clear rules on it, most of those people who brought some social media back in their life did not bring it back to their phone. Because once they knew, oh, here's the real value I get out of this tool, they realized, oh, this has nothing to do with self-documenting. This has nothing to do with having a ready source of distraction when on board. And so it became something that was on their computer that they used for very specific purposes. And so there was definitely a significant move away from, I think, the two biggest uses of these platforms right now, which is some combination of performative self-definition and distraction. And by distraction, I mean like the complete avoidance of any discomfort, boredom, or time alone with your own thoughts, right? Those two uses of social media basically disappeared for people who made it through this process.
What does that do for somebody, like being able to then get in touch with that sort of emotional self?
It unlocks everything. We underestimated, especially for young people who've had social media since they were, in their young adolescence. We underestimated the importance of reflection. So time alone with our own thoughts is where we make sense of our life. It's where we confront the things we don't like. It's where we try to make sense of the things that resonate and figure out why they resonate. It's where we build this structure for understanding our life, who we are, and what we're trying to do, that we keep updating and complicating as we have new experiences and new information. And all of this takes mental time. It just takes time when you're on a walk and you're thinking, you're driving and you're thinking, you're waiting in line and you're thinking. And it's where we begin to build our lives. We build who we are. We figure out what we want. We see the challenges we need to face. This gets taken away when you get in the habit of, I don't like being alone with my own thoughts. I don't like boredom. Swipe, ooh, that's a little uncomfortable. Tap. When we do that, we lose all of that time we need to define ourselves, figure out our lives, and figure out what we're all about. And so it's almost as if for a lot of people, they are able to emerge into a fully formed personhood for the first time once they take this out of their life as a constant presence. And I'm not even really being hyperbolic about it. What you have when you're taking every down moment and using this phone is, what you have is this sort of weird, shattered simulacrum of a personhood, where it's just a bunch of these liquid images of yourself, different impressions, careful curation, all based off of this sort of tactile feedback of likes and unlikes and retweets and unretweets and attacks or promotions, and what emojis are being used and how is this being received. And it's this weird fragmented self that has no depth to it, that's not rooted on anything. And you can't build a resilient life on that. You can't build a meaningful life on that. And when you replace that with thought and you figure out yourself and what you're all about, it's a completely different experience of the world. It's like you're coming from 2D into 3D. You're coming from dark into light. It's leaving Plato's cave in the Republic. And I'm being a little hyperbolic, but not really. For a lot of people, that is what it feels like when they get their mind back and they get more used to their mind, the good, the bad, the stuff they're afraid of, the stuff they're proud of, and they figure that all out. You can't get around that. You can't distract your way around that. We do that with our phone today. In other parts of history, we've done it with other substances. We forget that when Prohibition came to the United States, it was in part because we were consuming a massive amount of alcohol to get around of the dislocation and discomfort of the rise of industrialization and the change of society. We were trying to escape it. We're doing the same thing today. We've just replaced the bottles with screens. But it gets us to a similar place. You can't avoid yourself, what's going on, what you like, what you don't like. It's in the confrontation of that you actually build the meaningful life. And it requires you to put these things in their place.